All right, let's get started kicking off this series about the different types of people and how they resist change. And so, just as a reminder, this is an art stems from an article written by Vanessa Edwards, published in Science Popular, and it has a fun way of breaking down the different types of resistance to change. In addition, some leaders and I sat down when we originally taught this to a group of charge nurses, and so we came together and put in our own experiences and what we feel like's worked. And then the third type that I'm going to add in is just biblical principles and how God handled those things whenever he came across the same types of issues. And so I think all three are important, right? And then we're going to start by talking about the different types of why people resist change. And this is important because if you can kind of pin it to why, it will help you in making the resistance kind of lessen. And I'm gonna go through some things and put up some models and put up some different examples. We'll get started officially with the types of resistance. And so there are five. There's fear of the unknown. There's loss aversion, and loss aversion can be any kind of loss. And oftentimes people want to think that it's about, loss of control, but it could be loss of like time. It could be loss of like maybe somebody in the workforce. So like if you're consolidating jobs or something like that, the perception that they're gonna, lose something out of that. And so really you just have to think about any type of loss that they could perceive that as. And some of these can be related a little bit too. There's cognitive biases, like just the way that you think and the way that you believe, affecting that change that might be happening in your workplace. There's the threat to self-efficacy, and this is a big one. This is oftentimes the one that people feel the most, is that somehow you're going to ruin how efficient they are in their work, and that they're not going to be able to complete their work to the ability that they want to. And then the last one is disruption of habit, and this is really just people feeling comfortable in their roles and feeling confident. And so anytime that you challenge that, they that they have a tendency to get upset, which is all appropriate, right? And so I'm going to put up this change curve model, and the stages are the stage that the leader should follow, and then the colors are the emotions that the person who is experiencing the change feels. And so the first stage that we would be doing is sharing information. So I talked about that in the last diagram of when we were talking about using the different types of leaders, and we're going to give them all the information that they need, and we're going to answer any questions that they might have. And they're going to be in complete denial, right? And that's why we're going to give them information. It's just kind of setting the foundation of that. And then as they move into the anger stage, we as leaders are going to move into that support phase. And one of the things that people oftentimes forget, especially as leaders, is that we do need to let those people process their emotions, okay? I know that you need this change to happen, but you cannot go in there making demands or threats about whether they are or are not going to do this change. So in that support phase, that is not the time that we're going to go in there and say, if you don't do this, I'm going to write you up, okay? We have to let them go through the motions in order to be successful. And I'm not saying that people shouldn't be written up. I'm not saying anything like that. All I'm saying is that if you let the person process through the change, you have a higher probability of them being compliant later. And with that compliance, it's going to reduce turnover. I mean, you're going to not be spending all your time training new people. If you really support them through that change, there may be an increased loyalty. There's lots of benefits to this. And so one thing that is just super important is when they're in that angry phase, you are supported. You are not angry in return, okay? The energy you are given is not the energy you give, okay? We have to make sure that we maintain that supportive phase. The next phase that a person experiencing a change, they start exploring that change. Okay, well, then after they're done being mad, they're like, okay, well, if I have to deal with this, what does that really look like? And so that's when we're going to step in and start giving them direction, right? We're going to start helping them adjust to that change. And then the last phase that they're going to feel is that acceptance phase. And then we're going to encourage them and say, you did a great job. refrain from the whole, see, I told you it was going to be okay. This is not your moment, even though it really kind of is. You need to celebrate your wins internally. You don't need to celebrate your wins externally with your mouth. You need to be supportive of the fact that they are adjusting to the learning the change, and they are going along with the change that you wanted. So you have already won with them making the change. There's no need to feel validated with any kind of verbiage that you might want to use. So now that we have kind of figured out the different types of change and why they resist, let's start talking about those resistors, okay? And when we talk about them, we're going to talk about like examples of what kind of change that is, and what not to do, and what to do in order to support those types of people during those changes. And so the first one, I think, is the most obvious, and it's not necessarily the one that I feel like is the most that I receive, but it is the most it's the most challenging in my opinion, okay? And the reason why I think it's the most challenging is because you're dealing with somebody who doesn't trust you, right? So as the leader, they automatically assume that there's some ulterior motive. There's something going on. They have no trust for why you're doing what you're doing. And so the distruster is just that. I don't trust the manager's motives, or management's motives, leaders, whoever, doesn't matter, okay? And so we see this in Jonah, and this is why I'm starting with this one, okay? After Jonah figures out his whole life and gets thrown overboard and ends up in Nineveh, he goes and does exactly what God tells him to do. He didn't really want to. He tried to get away with it. He tried to get out of it, right? So he finally goes and does it. And after his job was to go, warn them about God, and they start repenting, and God forgives them, and he is mad. Okay, so at this point he knows that he's like, I knew you were just going to forgive them. I know how merciful you are. I knew that, and I knew that there was no point to coming over and do this. And he's upset, right? So he does not trust God and what God is doing in that moment. And so this can happen a lot. If you have a scenario where you're telling people to start changing some part of their workflow, and you tell them this is just temporary, but then the company sees it as a positive change, and so that they figure that they can make it work, and that it becomes something that they want to do full time. That person might come to you and say, I knew this wasn't temporary. You lied to us, and really you didn't lie. It's just things change, and that's just what happens, right? And so this might also come in with sometimes, I'm going to give an example of technology, okay? A new piece of technology, some new AI thing, because everything is AI, right? So we're going to implement this new AI change, and the people start getting nervous, and they're starting to say, hey, they implemented this new AI that calculates our finances or something like that, and now I really think all the finance people are going to lose their jobs. And they're trying to replace us with technology, and they're going to just lay us all off, and we're seeing this across the US and blah blah blah, and they're talking about all this stuff, right? And you're communicating that new change with the AI. That's your role in this scenario, right? So what we're going to do, okay, is we are going to provide all the details about the change, especially before, if possible, okay? This is a time when it is important to prepare them for that change before that change comes. Especially if someone distrusts you, you don't want it to just fall onto their lap the moment that it happens, right? You want them to be prepared. The second thing is that you want to reassure this distrusters concerns real time. Like if they have a concern and they are a distruster, you're going to want to sit down and you're going to want to talk to them in a private setting, okay? You're going to be giving them that reassurance that they need, all right? You don't necessarily always want to make this super public. You are really building a relationship from somebody who does not necessarily believe in you in that moment. So you are creating a relationship, and a relationship that you are building and supporting and all of those things does not need to necessarily be in public. You need to pull them aside. You need to be able to build that and spend some time with them and help them understand and show them care and concern. And if it is a concern that they might lose their jobs, and let's just say, let's say that maybe you thought it too. There is power in vulnerability to say, you know what, I don't know if it's going to happen or not, but at this point, this is what I know, and we're going to work through this, and we're all going to be okay at the end of this, because we're going to implement this change, and we're going to do what we're being told, and we're going to be in a better place once this system really becomes. This is what they're expecting. They're expecting faster turnarounds for your project. They're expecting this, whatever the story might be, right? And so you are going to openly share with others that are going to encourage that. So remember, we talked about those informal leaders. You want them to encourage that knowledge sharing, right? Especially that person who maybe distrusts you a little bit, because you want the other people to say, hey, Jessica, it's really not going to be that bad. I think you might be taking this overboard. Or if they do have those thoughts and feelings, and they're the ones that are actually having a conversation with you and building that trust with you, then you want them to go share the same thing to the other people who might be thinking it, but may not be as brave enough to say it. And so you also want to encourage them to address their concerns maybe higher than you, if it's truly something that is really important to them. And that's something that you're going to have to gauge in those conversations. You might be able to open up a platform, or go get your one up or something and bring them in and say, hey, do you mind sharing some of the things of why we're doing this? And oftentimes a lot of people will be very open to that idea, especially if it's going to help some type of employee satisfaction. They'll be able to just come in and help support you and give that message. So here's what we're not going to do, okay? We are absolutely not going to ignore their concerns. If you prove a distruster right, it is so hard to come back from that, okay? If you ignore them and they are able to negatively influence everyone because of their distrust, and if you are avoiding it and you are not doing anything about that, they are just going to have more fuel to go off of with all of the rest of the group. So you cannot avoid them, okay? And if not everything that you might have an answer for, and you might need to tell them, and you might even ask and still not get an answer, but you're just going to follow up with them. You're just going to let them know, hey, I don't have an answer for that, but I did ask and I'm still waiting, and I'm not sure. You say it. Say the hard things. I'm not sure I'm going to get an answer, but I'm going to do my best, and I'm going to come back and I'm going to tell you. The other thing that you're not going to do is you are not going to falsely assure them. You're not going to agree with them if you don't know. You're not going to sit there and go along with whatever they're saying in the negative. So if they're saying, yeah, they're going to replace us, you're not going to be like, yeah, they absolutely are. You should anticipate that, and I know that sounds like something you don't necessarily have to say, but you would be really surprised what people will do whenever they feel uncomfortable and they don't want people to quit, or they have this perceived relationship with these people that you are friends and that you guys have some sense of loyalty to each other and that y'all are in this together. It's not that you don't have a great relationship with them. It's just that every single person is going to look out for themselves, okay? And the worst thing that you can do as a leader is think that they are somehow going to just go out of their way to support and be loyal to you, when they're going to be loyal to their family. They're going to be loyal to their finances. They're going to be loyal to the things that are going on in their lives. And that's not wrong, right? Because in the same scenario, you might do the same thing. And so we just definitely don't want to do that. And so in the Bible, when Jonah is upset and God comes and tells him, he's not necessarily trusting his motives, he does like this emotional intelligence thing where he tries to teach him about that. And so, if you're not experienced in or have really high emotional intelligence, or you're not really experienced in leveraging previous examples, I'm not necessarily recommending this for every type of leader. But if you've been a leader for a long time, one of the things that you can do is kind of talk these people through changes that you may have experienced in the past that have had positive outcomes, maybe even experiences that you have had with that employee that you could remind them of, and you can bring them back and recenter them. And that's kind of what God does to Jonah. And it doesn't tell us whether Jonah accepted it or not. It's not in the story. It kind of ends with Jonah's really mad, right? He says, I'd rather die, but it doesn't really tell us if he received the message or not. But you can absolutely kind of bring people back and recenter them and tell them about all the changes that that have been there and that have been positive. And I think that's a good thing to do, is really kind of to recenter them, and just, especially, so if you think of that change curve model, right? When Jonah was really angry and he went off into the woods to see what God was going to do to Nineveh, God was kind of supportive with him. He made a plant grow, cover him, and then he had the worm eat it so he could teach him the lesson. But he was supportive during that time. He was gentle with Jonah. He could have easily gotten mad. I mean, Jonah was a mess, right? He got on a ship, said, I'm not going, had made them throw him overboard, had to be eaten by a whale to get, it wasn't like he was like the best servant that there was. So, God really could have come in and, like, if there was somebody who was going to rain fire on, it could have been Jonah, okay? But he didn't, right? He showed him all of that support, all of that love, gave him the information that he needed, and he really kind of followed that model as well. I don't know if Jonah accepted it or not, but that's okay. We're going to do that same thing with these people. We are going to just love them and support them through this change. We are going to help them. We are going to get them through this when they distrust the management's motives. And just one additional thought, especially if you are what I would call a middle manager, meaning you have the opportunity to blame somebody higher than you, don't, okay? Don't create tension and enemies where they don't need to be, okay? I know that it's tempting to do this, and I know that you may not even like your one-up, but just refrain from doing that. You need to present a united front. If you don't, you're basically helping people leave, right? And so I like to teach people this concept, and I'm going to share it with you. If you can imagine every single person carrying a suitcase with them, no matter where they go, whatever the scenario is, okay? In this scenario, this suitcase is, I'm coming to work, and this is my job, but at any moment I could get a new job. And so they're carrying a suitcase. The leaders and the coworkers and everybody, they either help pack that suitcase, and once it's full, that person zips up and leaves, or they help unpack that suitcase. And it's a constant shuffle of pack, unpack, right? And so if we think about coming to work and all my coworkers come and help me and support me, and then they have parties and they make me feel included, unpack. It unpacks that suitcase. If I have managers that don't understand me, who say all of these things to me, they don't treat me right, I don't feel like things are fair, pack, right? And so in this scenario, when you go and you create that friction between your one-up and you make it look like there's an enemy, you think in the moment, you think that you are unpacking their bag. You're like, it's not our fault. It's so and so. It's the CEO. It's the head of I'm not referencing that Coldplay thing. It's the head of HR. It's this. When you're saying that, you think you're unpacking, but those are still things that you cannot change in the workplace. So all you're doing is just kind of like messing with it. You're just moving it over. You're just shuffling it around, and really making it fit, because at the end, they're going to go home and they're going to think, well, if it's the CEO or the head of HR, like, I'm not going to change those things, right? And so you definitely want to take those things into consideration when you're talking about explaining things and the blame thing. All right, that's number one. Let's move on to number two. Number two is the skeptic, okay? They are the ones that are going to think that it will never work, all right? And so who is the biggest skeptic in the Bible? Moses, okay? God speaks to Moses as a burning bush and tells him, hey, you're going to do this. And Moses says, me? You want me to do it? I can't do that. Who am I? And he tells him, and then he says, I can't speak, and I can't do all this stuff. And God gives him a staff that turns into a snake, for goodness sake, and he's still fighting him. And he constantly tells God that, that he doesn't think that he can do this. He doesn't necessarily believe in what the mission is, or that he's capable, or that it is even capable. When he comes back to talk to him about the Pharaoh, I mean, there's just multiple times that we can see Moses being the skeptic, that this is never going to work. And so if we give us a real life example, let's just say that we're reorganizing the workflow of our department, and instead of, processing, getting a almost complete product, we're going to give them a half complete product so that they can start a minor build, right? And then that will help them create framework. I'm making this up. That will help them create framework faster, so that whenever the final product comes out, they're only going to have to make edits instead of waiting until the entire thing is coming out, and then they have to do the final thing, right? So this is our process, right? So we're going to make this process change. And this person comes out and they're like, man, we've tried this 1,000 times. It's never worked. It just wastes everybody's time. I don't know why we're trying this again. It didn't work then. It's not going to work now. This is where we're at. And we see this a lot, right? Like, we see people just automatically shoot down our ideas, especially if it's a repeat idea. And the reality is that maybe you have different people, maybe you have different things in place that may or may not make it successful. And it's a possibility that it may not work, but you will never know if you do not try. And so these are the things that we need to be able to explain whenever we're making the change. So what do we do in this situation? We ask questions about why they feel that it won't work, all right? This is the biggest opportunity that you have to convince them otherwise, okay? If you ask them questions and they cannot come up with answers, then you should feel supported in the change, right? Well, what about when this happens? Okay, well, we've made a plan for that. Or if you haven't made a plan, to say, you know what, that's an excellent point. Let's go make a plan for that, and then we're going to come back. If you do not validate a reason for this change not to work, then it will support the change overall. But you have to be open to asking those questions, and you have to be open to hearing the answer, and really understanding that they actually may know more about the process than you. And then you account for the things that they worry about, and you make that change, and you validate their concerns, and you encourage them to follow the process. You're like, I absolutely hear what you're saying. We're going to create a process for that, and I still need you to do this. If it's not going to work, I need you to absolutely try every piece of it so we can determine it's not going to work. But if you don't try, I won't know. And you're going to encourage them to bring forward those challenges after challenges after challenges. You might feel like, oh my gosh, you are just resisting this change. No, they are helping you build the change. And the moment you make them feel like they are not, they are going to stop working towards that change. And you have to really, truly get some humility in this situation and understand that you may really need to make some changes based off what they're saying. They may have better ideas. If we think about what Toyota's been able to accomplish in their facility, in their car manufacturing facility, their employees bring forward the problems. Their employees bring forward the solutions. They have a great model to follow. And so we have to be able to follow that great leadership style as well. And we need to make sure that we're addressing those concerns very quickly, even if it's not going to change, okay? You need to be on top of everything that skeptic is bringing forward, because if you don't, again, they're going to go spread that negativity. They're going to go say, oh, well, I talked to her about that. She said, she wasn't going to, she didn't answer my email, or she didn't do this, or she didn't do that. No, we're going to be on top of it, okay? And even if it's going to be like, hey, we talked about it. We ran through your model. This is why we think it's not going to work. We still want to continue with this right here. Are they going to be upset? Yes. But did you respond? Also yes. Okay. You do not want to leave them hanging. We're going to be clear, and we're going to be forthcoming in the information that we're going to share. What are we not going to do? Okay. If they are skeptical, we are not going to say that we are not sure it's going to work either. Okay? We're going to say, we have thought through this. We have thought through a plan. We're going to work through the plan. Okay? Do not agree with them in this. If they don't see that you're bought in, they're never going to buy in. And so we have to be very, very careful. Can you imagine what Moses would have done if God said, well, I'm not sure you can do it either, okay? I mean, you kind of stutter. I mean, can you imagine how he would have felt? Do you think he would have had the ability to go in there and go talk to the Pharaoh and guide the Israelites out? No, he would have never been able to do that. You have to encourage them, okay? And you have to avoid the negativity. In the Bible, God doesn't necessarily avoid the negativity, but he kind of gets mad at Moses, and he's kind of like firm with him, and he's like, no, he gets real serious with him. And so we have to also remember that we're not going to be negative. We're not going to talk negative about the people, like, oh, well, so remember I told you not to blame anyone. So we're not going to be like, oh, well, upper management says we're doing it, so we're doing it. We're not going to do that, okay? Why? It doesn't help, okay? It only hurts, and you're just packing that bag, all right? And we are only unpacking that bag. The change is already stressful enough. Unpack the bag, all right? I mean, you could pack the bag, but you're just going to be hiring the next person after the next person after the next person, and that is not always the best thing. You have the ability to build these people, to help them grow, to develop them, and if you're constantly starting from scratch, you are just going to make your life as a leader so much harder. I don't mean to be funny when I say this, but it's kind of like getting a new husband. Like, after you spent so much time and energy training one, like, or that's probably not appropriate. I should probably delete that. But like training a dog, right? You teach the dog to finally use the bathroom outside, and then you just you have to stop and you have to go get a new puppy every time. Like, that would be so much work. It would be so much stress. Don't do that to yourself. We do not want these people to leave. We want to help them grow. We want to help them change. And I'm sorry for my computer screen. I probably need to change my settings. And so we're going to continue to work towards that, and we're going to continue to unpack their bag. Uh-oh, I did something. I added a slide. I don't know how I did that, but I did. All right. How about the next type? All right. The next type is the passive resistor. Okay. A passive resistor is one that says, sure, I'll do it, but never does it. I'm not going to say that this is my go-to style, because every single time I feel like I react a different way, but I can honestly say that I have done this. And so I will agree when you're telling me, because you're my boss and you're telling me to do something, and I'm going to agree, and then I'm going to walk off, and then I start thinking about it, and I'm like, that does not make sense. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to see how serious they are. Sometimes I might just want to see if everybody else does it and what they say about it before I start doing it, but just different things. Like, my mind gets in the way, and I can't help that I'm this type of person. I'm working on it, something I'm working on, but I will say that this is sometimes me. All right, so who is this guy? Who is this in the Bible? And this person in the Bible is the young rich ruler that wants to follow Jesus. And he's like, yeah, I'm totally going to follow you. And Jesus says, okay, well, you got to get rid of all your riches and go do all this stuff. And he's like, okay. And he has no intention of really truly making that change. And so I think that this is a very real thing for a lot of people, is they really want to be good employees, but sometimes they just can't make it make sense in their head. I can't imagine having somebody say, give up all your riches and come, I'm not trying to be funny, but come walk the desert with me. I don't know how I feel about that myself. So again, this is my style, so probably relatable, but we see this a lot in a lot of different people. We see this as kind of a challenge to do, right? Because these people are usually like really good employees that do this, and you don't really expect anything out of them. So when they say, yeah, I'm going to do it, you kind of trust that they're really going to do it. And then when they don't, you're kind of like, you didn't do that? Really? And so, we're going to learn to deal with those types too, okay? So what do? You reinforce the expectations, okay? These are people who generally want to do the work, right? They just can't see why at the moment. And so, but for whatever reason, maybe they just don't want to. That's also a possibility with passive resistors. They can decide they just don't want to. But we're just going to reinforce that expectation. And then we're going to develop a learning plan if they need it. Okay, maybe, just maybe, they don't know how. And so if that's something that we think might be going on, we definitely want to do that for them. We want to make sure that they have every tool and resource to be successful. So let's say that I'm in this particular one, let's just say that I'm implementing a new computer system. We're going to stick with AI. I'm implementing a new computer system, and I tell them that they have to do all this training with this one particular platform. I might just be nervous. I might be nervous that I mean, I openly told y'all that I needed help with social media. If you told me today that I had to do something on TikTok, I probably would have like a massive heart attack. Like, I really don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. And so if you told me that, I'd be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna do it. And then I might even ask around, but if I don't have the confidence level in it, I may or may not do it. So you wanna make sure that you can develop a learning plan if needed. And when they're not making the change, you're gonna kind of ask them, but you're not going to be mean about it. You're going to be really like kind about it. You're going to be like, hey, I noticed that you weren't doing this. Why aren't you doing that? And it might sound weird that I'm telling you to be super gentle with these people, but remember, these people are not generally the ones who cause you problems, okay? They are someone who, for the most part, generally does their job. And so, like I said, when they tell you they're going to do something, you really think they're going to do it. So we're going to tread lightly with this group. And we're going to ask them about it, and we're going to let them tell you so that you can do whatever it is that you need to do. Not always are they the high performers. I remember one time I was having a conversation with an employee, and I said, hey, what can we do to get you here on time? Being on time is the foundation of, work. Like, it is the bare minimum is to get here on time. So what can I do to help support you? Are you, can I call you in the morning to make sure that you're up, or can I do this? And she turned around and she said, I don't need help getting up. I just don't want to be here. So I go for a run, or I make myself some eggs, or I water my plants. Like, I just don't want to be here. If that's the case, that's an entirely different story, right? But you can gently probe, like, what you can do or what's going on. And so you may not get an answer that you really like, and that's okay. We'll figure that part out. And if that's the case, we will hold you accountable in the end. If this change is non-negotiable and we're going to this new software, and you have to start working in this software, if you don't start working in the software, you ultimately might need to find a new job. I might help you pack that suitcase, right? But if it's like fears and knowledge and those kinds of things, then I'm going to help you unpack that suitcase, and I'm going to say, nope, I can help you do that. So there's definitely a time and a place for packing the suitcase, but in this particular case, we're going to say that they need a learning plan, and we're going to help them get there, and we're going to help them walk through those concerns that they have in order to make sure that bag's not packed. What are we not going to do? Okay, we are not going to assume that one conversation is enough. Okay, if they really are resistant to this change and they are really struggling with that change, one time is not enough. That doesn't mean that you have to write them up every single time. That does not mean that you cannot extend grace while they're learning. That just means that you need to follow up with them to let them know that you are watching. Okay, let them know that this is on your radar. I am aware that this is something that you are struggling with, and I'm going to support you. And you are not going to say, I already told you once. Okay, like, you're going to be gentle, and you're going to say, hey, I thought we had a plan, and so what's going on? Do we need to adjust the plan? How can I help support you in this? And you're going to ask those questions, and you're going to unpack, and you're not going to get angry with them. Okay. If you are getting you can get angry if you're helping them pack the bag. So if they're not doing their job, and they have no plan to do that job, like that person that I was talking about, I'm not saying don't get angry at anybody. That's not nice. But I'm not saying to not hold that person accountable. I'm not gonna lie, I did not have as much compassion about the tardiness after she said that, right? And so I think that that's a little bit different. That's a little bit warranted. But let's say that they need that learning plan and they're struggling with the platform, with that new app or whatever that they're dealing with. We're gonna continue to support them, because everybody learns differently, and some people do need time to learn. And maybe they need a support person or something like that they can ask for help for. And so we're just going to make sure that we're continuing to support them in a kind way, and then we're going to help pack the suitcase for people that really need it. Okay, so let's go to the next one. King Saul. King Saul is what we would call the comfort zoner, okay? But I've always done it this way. And we see this in a lot of different ways in King Saul. With King Saul, he begins to think that his way is better, and that, you know, he stops relying on God, okay? And he starts relying on himself, on what he feels like he knows and the comfort level that he feels. And that gets him in a lot of trouble, right? And ultimately, you know, essentially makes him lose the throne. But we often see this in a lot of people, and I don't. This is not meant to say anything about age or anything, but with people with tenure, okay, with people that have been there for a long time and they get super comfortable in their role, change is so hard for that group in particular. And so we see this a lot with that group. We see this a lot of people with people who are just getting the hang of things, like, oh, I just got it, and now you want to change it. So they struggle with this a little bit as well. And so you know, we talked about changing that program. We're going to stick with that example, because I think that's a good example in terms of the comfort zoner. It could be, you know, that they don't want to change, or it could be that they maybe they think that they can't. Like, sometimes a lot of these people have things going on at home, and like the fact that this is happening at work and this is their place of peace during this time. You also see that in this group as well. And so what are we going to do? We are going to support them, and we are going to acknowledge that the change is difficult, okay? We are going to just put it out there and say, look, I know this may not be easy for you, right? I know that this is a hard change. Completely changing programs is never easy, but we're going to provide you training, and we're going to make sure that you have everything that you need. And if you even need a partner or a buddy for the system, we can assign you that, or something like that. We can do whatever it is that we need to do in order to support you. And we're going to provide them reassurance by constantly talking about the positives that benefit that person. This is why, you know, this is what's kind of like, we're going to talk about another what's in it for me, but we're going to talk about what's in it for them with that comfort zoner, so we can kind of like motivate them to get used to the change and to kind of want the change. We're going to offer that support, like I told you, with that partner if needed, and we're going to provide positive reinforcements when we see the change. Hey, I noticed you turned in a report by that new platform. Great job. You know, I think I can see that you're coming along. I can see the progress that you're making. And we're going to continue to reinforce that with positive reinforcements. Why? Because if you positive reinforce something, they are more likely to repeat it. Okay, so you want to give them that knowledge that they're doing a good job. You want to give them that recognition. Not all recognition needs to be public. You don't need to give them a plaque that says, hey, you did one thing. And I get this a lot, okay? I get this from leaders a lot, that is really hard for them to recognize somebody for doing their job, okay? Well, we talked about a little bit about refinement. You need to get that out of you, okay? Just let it go, all right? I get that they're supposed to get to do their job. I get that you're paying them to do a job. But just think about how many people that don't do their job that you have to go have conversations with. And it's a lot, right? So if it's common for you not to do your job, is it common for you to do your job? Maybe 50-50. So if it's common that they're not going to do their jobs and you can go coach them, and it's common that they do their job, then you can go recognize them. Those are equal parts, right? And I can, in fact, show gratitude for whatever I want, okay? So if I want to go show gratitude that you show up every day, I'm going to go show gratitude. And I'm going to go tell them, hey, you know what? I love the consistency of your performance, okay? You come into work every single day and you turn in your work, and you know what? Maybe they're not a superstar, but maybe they are consistent. It's okay to go out there and say, hey, you're doing a great job. If you're sitting there saying, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to go tell them that because that's their job. Okay, pack the bag, all right? Because somebody else is going to go out there and tell them that they're not valued, all right? Their coworker's going to say, man, she never compliments you. She doesn't care about you. When that's not true, okay? It's just a different type of caring. And I have heard so many different things. Oh, this is the participation generation. You know what? Let's not label anybody or do anything like that. If we want to, just think of it that way. If you want to extend some type of recognition or gratitude, or you think it, just go share it with somebody. Why not share some positivity in the world? Why is it only that I have to tell you when you're doing bad, or that I can't acknowledge when you're doing something right? And right is not always good or great. Right is just right. And I can acknowledge right, and I can acknowledge wrong, and I can acknowledge good, and I can acknowledge bad. And all of those things are okay. So I'm going to tell you to throw that thought process in the trash. Refine it. Burn it. Get it out, because it is not worth anything in the workplace. We are here to support people, and we are here to be there for them. And if they need that, they need it. And if they don't, and they're like, I don't really like recognition, I don't like public recognition, then send them an email, okay? Send them a text message. Send them whatever they need. I mean, whatever's within the realm of what they need. But don't ignore it, because it's not worth it. What we're not going to do for this group, so this group is in their comfort zone, and they've always done it this way. We are not going to dismiss their concerns. We're not going to be like, well, it's your job, you got to do it, okay? It is their job. I totally agree, okay? But if they're gonna make a change, and you're gonna force them to make a change, then they can change jobs, and you don't want them to leave. And if you ignore them, if they're already gonna have some type of big change, and this is why we see such major change with big leadership shifts, is if there's already going to be some big type of change that I'm going to go through, there might as well be a change that I can control. And if I can control that change, then I'm going to go try to make more money, or get a job closer to home, or with less travel, or work from home is the biggest thing I hear these days, or one that meets the needs of my family. If I'm already going to be forced to do a change, it's going to be a change that I want, not a change that you want. So you better go out there and support them through this change, so that they feel that love and that comfort, so that they don't go create a change that's that's reasonable for them. We also don't want to withhold information with them. This is not the time to do that, okay? When I told you to share all the benefits, share all the benefits. And if there's downsides, go ahead and share those too, okay? We want to make sure that we're being transparent with them. Again, for the same reason, if they're already going through change, they're going to get to choose the type of change that they want to go through. And you need to be able to provide that space to make that change. You can't go out there and have one conversation with them and think, oh, they're going to go along with what I say. No, let them, that they're going to go through that change curve. Like, let them process it out. Let them take the time to be able to make the change. Support them through the change. Not everything has to be punitive. And if there's a metric or something that you're trying to hit, then you might need to go have more conversations, but you might need to hit every different type of resistor of change and not focus on just one type. If we position ourselves correctly, the change will happen faster, and you will be able to hit whatever it is that you're trying to hit. And if there is no metric, then you will get a better compliance with change if you allow people to feel those emotions and get through the processing part of all of this. And it takes work on your end. It is not simple. I'm about to give you 7 different types of people that you have to keep in your mind, and try to kind of almost profile a little bit and say, oh, this might be what you're feeling, okay? But if you make this a common, not necessarily common, if you make this very practiced with yourself, it will become natural. It will just be something, the way that you treat people and the way that you talk to people. It will automatically be what comes out of your mouth if it's something that you train yourself to do, because it is also change, right? All right, let's go to the next one. The next one is being overwhelmed. So I don't have time for this. I can't make this change right now. This is too much. This is not possible. There's too many responsibilities. So now I've implemented this new program, and with this new program, it means that this AI program, it means that everybody's secretary is going away. That's probably not a good example, but I'll think of a better one in a minute. Meaning, you're actually going to lose something, and you're going to have to increase your workload. Okay, increase your workload. But they decreased your workload with that new AI platform. So maybe you were watching Netflix while you were working. Just kidding, we don't do that. But anyway, so you actually had some more time, and you were feeling good about it, and you were really on top of everything. All your job was done. You had all your reports in. Everything was getting in early, and you felt like you were in a good place. And then they come and tell you that they're going to make this change, and you're going to have that added workload, and you're like, whoa, I cannot take this on. I cannot handle anymore. This is too much. That is the overwhelmed person. All right. So this is Jeremiah in the Bible, and they talk about Jeremiah always lamenting, and he is, I'm not trying to be mean, but he's essentially a whiner. Okay, and it's unfortunate that this happens, but it is everybody has seasons, right? So he's in a down season, and everything is a lot, and it's important to understand that in the job that we have, where we're not packing people's bags, we need to be prepared for these types of people. And so what are we going to do? We are going to give details as to why it benefits them. Okay, and we are going to offer solutions that make the transition easier. So we are going to give them tips and tricks and support, and we might even walk them through the first time that they're doing it. We might sit with them a little bit. There's a number of things that we can do to support them. We're going to give them the rationale as many times and in as many ways as they need. Okay? We are going to almost sound like a broken record, except for instead of saying a broken record, we're going to say it a different way each time. And we're going to encourage them to just try it. Okay, we're trial period. Give me a week. Try it for a week. If you experience something, come back. Okay, especially if you're really sure that this change is not going to really affect them, or it's going to make it easier, even better. Try. I strongly encourage a trial period. And oftentimes, this overwhelmed people are often, if they match that with that informal leader, like we talked about before. This is who I like to target to go do trial periods, because if it's successful and they were really like, talking about it, saying that they couldn't do it, they're going to be your biggest advocates moving forward. So if it really saves them time and they're able to get ahead by making the change, they're going to be your biggest marketer, and you're not going to have to worry about a single thing after they figure it out that it is faster. They're going to tell everybody, oh no, go try this. So and so taught me how to do this, and this is the fastest way, and blah blah blah. And they will go support the change more than you could ever support the change. Okay. What are we not going to do? We're not going to be dismissive to their concerns. We're not going to make it seem like we're taking it lightly. We're not going to say that they're not overwhelmed. Okay, we're not going to go up to them and say, well, what are you doing with your time? Throw it out the window. We're not doing that. Okay, even if a person is overwhelmed or perceives themselves as overwhelmed, they already have that feeling. Being a jerk about it is not going to make the feeling go away. So let's not do that, right? You're only going to help them pack their bag. And I see this so much when we just want to make a comment or question somebody in that time of, well, what is it that you're doing with your time? Let's just refrain from doing that. If it's not going to support our cause, we are not going to be the reason our change is not successful. And I think that's so important for leaders to hear sometimes. Do not hurt yourself thinking that you're doing the right thing only to make it worse at the end. Like, we have to figure out, if I have to say it 5 times in a single day, I'm going to go say it 5 times in a single day, because no change is going to happen in one single day. Now, if you're saying it 5 months later, okay, we want to do something about it, totally agree. That's not what I'm saying. I'm talking about in the moment, in the change, when they're in the curve, we're going to get there. And so we're also not going to agree, but we are going to empathize with them, okay? If they say something about the overwhelming change, let's use this whole I see it online that everybody's got to go back to the office, okay? It's a big change, and you can empathize with the fact that they have to go back to the office, all right? And here's what other people say. Millions of people across America get up and go to work every single day. Well, that's great. Fun fact. Appreciate it, okay? But 5 minutes ago, I wasn't one of those people. And so it's not really helpful for you to say that, all right? I recognize that you're going to have to go into the office, and I know that this is a big change, and I know that it's going to change a lot of your family dynamics. And if there's something that we can do to support you through the change, knowing that it's not optional, we're going to have to come into the office, let us know what other ways that we can support you so that we can start working on them. And don't threaten them with not making the change. I mean, so I saw everybody say, if you don't come in, you're going to lose your job. Okay. I guess in a way that's true. There's not a need to say it. Okay. If we say you have to come into your job and you say, I can't make that change, and I'm going to have to quit if you make this mandate where I have to come into work, they're going to quit. Why are you threatening them? What is that getting you through? Like, they're going to quit anyway because it's not going to work for what they need. And so there's no need to go and tell people, well, I'm going to write you up if you don't do this. Clearly, at some point, if it's part of the job, we're going to get in trouble. You're not necessarily always helping in those situations. Now, let's say we're 5 months into the change, and you're still on the struggle bus, and you are not doing what you're supposed to be doing, and I need to sit down and I need to have a conversation with you, and I am setting clear expectations, and I'm laying it out, and I'm saying, look, this change has been going on, you are still not complying with the change, and I'm expecting you to do this, and if you're not going to do this, then there's going to be some type of formal consequence. That's fine, but in the moment, we're not going to do that. We're not gonna pack that bag unnecessarily. We are definitely not going to help them leave just from a momentary overwhelm period. And you do not know why they're overwhelmed. Again, remember, people have lives outside of their work. Okay, this could be their place of peace. They could be overwhelmed with things going on outside, and now they're here at work. And I'm not saying that you're responsible for their personal life. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that if they are overwhelmed, it's multifactorial, and so we can, if we don't want to lose people, if we want to maintain and retain talent, then this is what we need to do in order to do that. Now, if you don't care if they come or go, don't do it. All right, peace, see you. Don't want to come in the office? There's a million of you lined up. I'm not sure that's true anymore, but I mean, it's whatever your goal is, and whatever you want for your team. But if you're like, man, I can't keep anybody, and they say everybody leaves because of their leader, and you're like, I don't do anything. Well, maybe you don't do anything. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe you don't encourage. Maybe you don't support. Maybe you don't do those things. And so how can you adapt a little bit and refine who you are in order to be that supportive person that maybe doesn't come natural to you? And we see this a lot in leadership, and specifically leadership, okay? Because oftentimes we equate skill and ability with leadership. You can be excellent at your job and be a terrible leader, okay? But what ends up happening? People who are excellent at their job end up promoting, and they don't know how to be leaders. And so this is really common. If you are not naturally supportive and things come naturally to you, and you don't understand why people don't understand, that's an emotional intelligence thing. That means that you need to start focusing on that. All right, let's finish out the last two types of resistance to change. The next one is the what's in it for me type. And the what's in it for me type are often looking for the positives in it. And some people will kind of want to make it seem like they're being selfish. And I think that that's one point of view when you want to look at that. But really, if you think about it, in other scenarios, I had told you to tell them what benefits them. And so these are the people that lead with that. They just want to know what is it that's going to help them be successful in this change, and why should they want it. And to me, this is the easiest one to deal with because you can clearly outline what that expectation is. But when we look into the Bible to see who this mimics, we use the example of Jacob. And Jacob was in the Jacob of Genesis, right? So Jacob comes and has a dream, and the Lord tells him that he's gonna like make his descendants many, that he's gonna take care of him, he's gonna be with him, and that basically that he doesn't need anything. He's not gonna need anything. And so after that moment, Jacob gets scared. He has that moment of realization of how powerful God is, and that fear kind of drives his whole faith thing. So remember, the fear of the unknown counts as this change, right? So he's about to change everything about himself and his faith based off of this dream. And so when he tells God that he's going to do this, he makes a conditional vow. Not, and some people will read it and think, oh, he's saying if he does these things like a good thing. But is it? He says, if God does provides me with food or provides me with this and all this, and I will certainly serve him. And so there are some kinds of conditions in there in that vow to be served. And so he's looking for what's in it for him in his service to the Lord. And so in real life, though, when we're talking about the change, and if we keep with this change of the AI platform and those kinds of things, we need to make sure that we explain the real purpose behind the change and help redirect all the people that we're dealing with in order to talk through the positives. And that what's in it for me person is going to be looking for those, right? They're going to be, that's what they're listening for. And then we're going to explain what is really in it to them, and you're going to tailor it to the person that you're speaking to. And this is the most important part, okay? If somebody is a what's in it for me person and they're interested in time, you need to talk to them about all the ways that this is going to reduce them time, okay? If this is a person who maybe doesn't like paper and it's going to be an electronic platform, you're going to want to play to the fact that they're going to talk about paper. And they're going to have less paper. And so you're going to make it efficient for the person that you are speaking to. And this is so important when you're talking to this particular group. And then you're going to circle back and make sure that they clearly understand what's in it for them so that they can help propel the change. Remember, every person who moves forward with the change then becomes an advocate for you in the change to convince others. Here's what we don't want to do. We do not want to be dismissive of that statement. Like, if somebody came in there and say, well, why should I change? What's it going to do for me? Sometimes as leaders, we can kind of take offense to that. Like, why do you have an attitude or whatever we want to tell them? And let's just kind of for a second, just take the emotion out of it. Even if that person leads with a certain emotion, it is totally within a leader's control to take control of the situation and to bring the tone back down and de-escalate the situation by saying, hey, there's lots of things in there for you. And you take their questions seriously, and it might catch them off guard a little bit, especially if they really did come with an attitude that you're gonna choose to not answer in that way. But you're also, we talked about this in one of my previous videos where we talk about how the Apostle Paul says to reach people. He references this race, right? And so you have to understand that it is about kind of like winning, right? You don't want to care how you win, right? You don't want to win just because you say change and everybody changes. You can also win by convincing people to change and the change still happen. The path to that winning doesn't necessarily always matter. And so we don't want to focus on all of the little things. We just want to make sure that they understand and that we respond appropriately and that we get them through this change. So we definitely don't want to be dismissive to the way that they're asking questions or the way that they're seeking what it is that they need. The second thing that we don't want to do is just ignore the response. Like a lot of people are going to ask this question, and you can choose to deflect, right? And you don't want to do that. And if there's not a benefit to them, okay, a direct benefit to them, there's very, very rarely a time that we have to make a complete change unless it's about money or something like that, that does not have a benefit to somebody, okay? And this is a really hard kind of change, and I'm not saying that it's easy, and we can have a separate conversation about this type of change. But when you're making a change that supports another group of people and not you, so maybe you are taking on an increased workload for that other group of people, you have to be able to explain the global picture. And so even in this scenario, if let's say we're making the change from this new platform because it helps the finance department or something like that, you would need to clearly explain that, and not just ignore it because there really is no benefit for you. You just have to do it because they said. And we don't necessarily want to say that either, right? We want to manage up the situation, but that is why we're not going to ignore that. And we can talk about how to deal with like really hard change that doesn't necessarily always benefit the person in another video. If you're interested, just comment and I'll see it. The last one is, which kind of makes me laugh because I think that people oftentimes view this as the hardest one. I don't think this is the hardest one. And this is the vocal opponent. This is the one that is talking the loudest, telling everybody this is a terrible idea. You don't have to wonder what they're thinking because they have told you what they're thinking. It is not a secret. They have made it very clear how they feel in this situation. And people often shy away from this group because of their boldness. And the reality is the vocal opponent usually is the loudest and draws the most attention, but usually they do it, okay? These are the group that I like to say that they just complain to complain to complain, and they still somehow end up doing the job, and they still end up kind of even doing a great job sometimes. They just have to complain and get it all out, and then they'll do it, okay? And they won't like it, and they'll complain about it while they're doing it, but they'll still usually do it. And so the biblical person that this ties to is Peter, okay? There's a number of times that Peter says that he's not going to do something, and that he's experiencing some type of change. You think, when we think about after the Last Supper, when Jesus is telling him that he's going to go away, and that this is going to be a little bit different, and Peter's like, no, and he's like, yeah, you're going to deny me, and he's like, no, I would never do that. And he's often the one that's talking about how even at the Last Supper, that that he's the favored one. There's so many conversations when he kind of pushes back on Jesus, and is very vocal with him, and and Jesus is like, whoa, you need to calm down. And so we see this a lot with him, and Jesus is super patient. Like at one point, I think in one of the times that he addresses him, Jesus does kind of get mad at him and tells him something. And obviously at this point Jesus is human, and so who can blame somebody for kind of getting upset with the vocal opponent when they keep coming at you? But just really understanding that there are certain ways that you can deal with them. And the first one is you do need to understand that it's important to people to say their piece, okay? And when they do comply, great. And if they don't, then they'll need coaching about how to express themselves, okay? And it's a process, right? We're not going to expect them to fix it overnight, but we're going to, because they are often the type that are complying, they're often maybe even somewhat of your higher performers or those kinds of things. And so this is just a refinement of them in their own way. And so we'll just go back and provide that second coaching about how we should, help them grow as a professional. And so then you want to give them an outlet for that type of complaining. So part of that coaching is to say, hey, I know that you have really strong opinions about this, and I am always interested in your opinions. You always have a great perspective, and you often make me pause and think and make me have to plan in order to make the situation better. And so I appreciate that very much. And can you tell them? My son's playing video game here. Can you tell them to be quiet? Can you walk down there? Don't scream. Don't scream. Okay. So, sorry. All right. So, you often want to, in that coaching, tell them that you're going to give them that private space in order to vent. Like, I love your opinions, and you're going to meet with them separately, and you're going to let them vent, and you're going to let them you're going to let them have the conversation with you first, and you might even want to try to tell them before you tell everybody else, okay? And the reason why is because if they're going to so vocally oppose it, and they're just going to want to talk it out with you, if you have that space in private, then when you make the public announcement, it may go smoother, and you may get more compliance from the very beginning. So this is, remember, usually the vocal opponent is an informal leader. So remember, we talked about that before. So this is one of those things. And then you're going to use them because of their vocalness, okay? Like I said, oftentimes they're influence. So you're going to coach them, and you're going to work with them on the power of influence and the power of being an informal leader to help you make that change, okay? But what you're not going to do is dismiss them. If you dismiss them, they will continue with the narrative that they want to speak, and you are going to be fighting against an invisible enemy that is just plain perception, and perception is so hard to beat, okay? And and like, when people are looking for things, they're going to find them, right? So if they're looking for something wrong with this process, and when it comes to perception, everything about the process is going to be wrong. So you really want to make sure that you're heading them off before it goes south. And then you're not going to encourage their behavior. You're not going to encourage that vocal, loud, let me just say this, okay? You can encourage any type of appropriate vocal engagement. And the key word is appropriate, okay? We're not going to encourage behavior that is not appropriate, and we are going to correct it. We're going to allow them to be themselves for the moment, but we're not going to let the behavior continue. So we are going to expect improvement with change after change after change after change, and that is perfectly acceptable. But we're not going to encourage them the way that to continue on the path that they are on. It is destructive to a team dynamic, and it's just not worth the battle of letting it continue. And so I know that's sometimes difficult to do, and again, remember that these people often comply, and they're often high performers, and they're often pretty well respected, right? And so it may feel like you're it may feel like you might be experiencing loss if eventually they have to go away or something like that. But in the end, when you have the right people in the right place in terms of your team, that is when your team can truly propel forward. If you continue to allow one person to drag you back down, that is the reason why you feel like you're going like this, okay? Instead of a steady incline up, is because you allow somebody to generally bring you back down, and then you have to build it back up. And maybe you're great at building back up, right? And it's a skill that you might have as a leader, but you feel it as that leader, feeling that up and down, and feeling like you're not making progress. And so that is all 7. And so just really quickly, I'll just go back over all 7 just to remind you the different types. So the first type is the distruster. The second type is the skeptic. The third type is the passive resistor. The fourth type is the comfort zoner. The fifth type is the overwhelmed. The sixth type is the what's in it for me. And then again, the last one is the vocal opponent. I hope you enjoyed this learning opportunity. If you have any questions, you can always comment, or you can email info@lightbeneathmyfeet.com, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have.